Hello, everyone, to another session of Conscious Living Collective. My name is Tomek, and I welcome you once again on this wonderful evening, at least here in Sydney, Australia. How are you doing? Hello, Scott. Hello, Sharon. Hello, Katie. Good to see you here. How wonderful you could make it. Hello, Dave. Hello, Sunny. Hello, Sandy. I can see Charlotte is here as well. I'm so glad to hear all the familiar faces. And I'm wondering, how are you doing? How is everything? If you're here for the first time, feel free to raise your hand and say hi. It's always good to see new faces before we get into the topic. Hello, Nola. Hello, Sandy. Beautiful. Hello, Caroline. Good to see you all. So today, a very important topic suggested by one of our members on the circle, by Sue, if I remember correctly. Exploring guilt. Such a human emotion. Something that we experience. Every single person experiences it. The question, however, is how to deal with it. What to do with it. What is guilt in the first place? And I want to head it to you and ask you, what do you think? How do you define guilt? What do you feel guilty about at times? What is your source of guilt? I'll be very curious to know from you, since this is Conscious Living Collective, is not just me. As a matter of fact, this could not happen without your presence. I'd like to ask you. Hey, V is here. Wonderful. Magda is here as well from Cornwall. Beautiful. Jane from south coast of England. This session is, by the way, devoted to all those of you who live in Europe and in the time zone where here is evening. The past couple of sessions I organized in time that was clearly not very good for you because it was middle of the night. But I thought I will, for the next meeting of the Conscious Living Collective, I will rotate. One is going to be in the, I call it the Europe time, and the other time it is going to be the US time. So I can gather all of you and make you included in this wonderful project of mine. Still exchanging hellos and welcomes. But once again, I want to repeat that question. What do you feel guilty about? Is there anything in your life that you perhaps regret? And why is it that you're regretting it? How you define guilt? What is the role of guilt in your life? Scott defines guilt as beating yourself up for something that has already passed. This is a very good point, Scott. Thank you. Guilt relates to things mostly that are related to a past behavior, or in my case, are related to behaviors that continue to happen. Some obviously experienced that behavior in the past, and some of us continue experience them. I want to share with you things perhaps I feel often guilty about. I always feel, or sometimes feel guilty because I have a feeling I'm not doing enough. Perhaps I should do more sessions here on Insight Timer. Perhaps I should record more meditations. Perhaps I should finally publish a course on Insight Timer. So, as you can see, guilt in this case comes from the past, but very much affects our present. And this is an important thing to notice, that guilt, although relates to the events in the past that we no longer have influence on, affects our present. And that's where the power of guilt comes from, something I want to talk about. Suni says, never doing enough. And this is another, thank you, Suni, for sharing it. Because guilt has a lot to do with the sense of self-worth, or our sense of self-worth. And that's another thing I'd like to talk to you about. How do you perceive, when do you feel guilty? How is if you ask yourself a question, how is your sense of self-worth? One of my favorite mantras that so many of you who listen to me know already. I am loved, I am worthy, I am enough. How do you feel when you say those words to yourself in your head? Raya says, guilt to me is a feeling that you could have done something better. Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right. There's something in the past that we retrospectively analyze and say, oh, I could do this better. Absolutely. Thank you, Raya. Sharon says, focusing on self too much and not taking enough time to focus on others, especially loved ones. Yes, this is a very much something that I resonate with, because when the times are tough, we tend to focus on ourselves and forget that there are people, loved ones around us that are here to help us, to support us, and vice versa, people that we can support. Thank you, Sharon, for sharing. Katie, beautiful point. Guilt to me is not being real to me. Very interesting. I love that comment. I love that statement. Dave, I find guilt is often made to be so much worse in your mind rather than the reality of the situation. Fantastic. Thank you, Dave. That is a very important point. As we go into exploring guilt, it is always valid to explore what could I have done differently? And why am I ruminating about it? And most importantly, like in Hitchcock movie, Hitchcock had this technique when he pointed out towards a danger, but he never revealed it. And guilt is something similar. And Hitchcock, by using that technique, made this monster much worse than it actually was. And I think this is what Dave is pointing towards, that when we start thinking about the events from the past, somehow, some way, our mind has a tendency to exaggerate and make things worse than they actually are. Jane shares with us, one of my grown daughters shamed me recently. I also felt guilty because of her interpretation. Self-worth plummeted. Thank you, Jane, for being vulnerable and sharing that. Perhaps this is a good time to point out and ask you, what is the difference between shame and guilt? There's a clear connection there. And it seems like guilt or shame is an older sister of guilt is older sister of shame. No, or shame is older sister of guilt. However, one flows from the other. What do you guys think? So if you think about guilt and shame, when Jane says that I feel shamed by my older daughter, if you think about it, shame is always a situation where it's directed towards self, towards some quality of me. And shame can be debilitating because there's nothing that can be done. It's a statement that relates to self that cannot be changed. And shame, if you remember my sessions on expansion, shame is the lowest possible, or contains the lowest possible quality or vibration of energy. It's something that takes us down without giving us a chance to recover. That's why shame, feeling ashamed, is such a debilitating emotion. Guilt, on the contrary, if you think about it, usually reflects on a behavior. And behavior, by its nature, most of the time can be amended. We can learn from our mistakes. Guilt, as a matter of fact, from the scientific point of view and from psychological point of view, plays an important role in our evolution. Guilt is not always bad. Think about the situation from your past where you feel guilty, like we gave examples here, for not being enough or not doing something good enough. Whether that was true or not, the simple reflection on that previous situation, perhaps, only perhaps, could help you to do something better or to make amends. It goes without saying that not a single person here, nor anywhere else, did not make mistakes in the past. We all do mistakes. And as a matter of fact, not only making mistakes makes us a better person, but doing amends or making amends to fix those mistakes helps us to learn. So guilt can be, and certainly is from the evolutionary point of view, a strong tool and motivation to do better. However, if we go in between that area between feeling guilty and regretting something, and we're moving towards shame, when we feel bad about ourselves, when the sense of self-worth drops, as Jane beautifully put it, that's where we may start spiraling down. And that's where the feeling it's no longer beneficial. We cannot amend it. It demotivates us. It's self-defeating, if you will. Kirsten says, those of us blessed to be raised Catholic seem to have more of a connection to guilt than others than were not. Thank you so much, Kirsten, for that comment. Certainly, I was raised in the structure of Catholic Church, and I remember being a kid going to a confession and feeling guilty, tremendously guilty about all those teeny tiny things that I was told made me put to hell. And things were like swearing or saying lies, the small ones, obviously, what a little kid can lie about, or having the classic boys' sexual misconduct. How difficult it was to really confess that to a stranger, to a priest. It certainly made me and pretty much all the kids feel ashamed. That line between guilt and shame was crossed, because some of those behaviors, if you think about it, are impossible to amend, particularly within a short period of time. And science clearly shows the more guilty we feel about certain behavior, the more likely are we to repeat it. There is a classic experiment in which there are two groups of people. Both of them are obese, and one group is being given donuts. And say, if you can eat as many donuts as you like, and don't worry, it's absolutely fine. And the other group was told, if you eat a certain amount of donuts, that's bad for you. That's bad for your health. That makes you more obese. And basically was given to them all those negative reinforcement, so to speak. And interestingly enough, the group that was allowed to eat as many donuts with no consequences, on average, ate much less than the group that was shamed and make feel guilty about eating tasty treats. And this is very interesting because it's very counterintuitive. In Catholic Church, the way I was told, maybe assumption was that if I make you feel guilty, if I use the figure of God to make you feel guilty and ashamed, that should have a positive result. But science actually tells a very different story. And the opposite is true. Actually giving us freedom to explore and make mistakes and then learn from them. It's not only natural course of action, but also necessary if we want to learn. That's how we move on. Everybody does mistakes. So thank you very much for that comment. Jane says there's such thing as healthy shame related to acknowledging guilt. Most shame is imposed on us. I'm not sure, Jane, if that's a statement or that's a question. There's a such thing as healthy shame. I do not believe there are forms of healthy shame. Shame is always, as I said, is directed towards self and to some quality of the self that cannot be changed. And if we explore that kind of quality, there's not really a lesson that can be learned from them. There's no way back unless we use self-compassion, about which I want to talk about in a second. Sunni said, quite a few of my friends raised Catholics carry a lot of trauma. Every religion, every dogma, maybe I should say, not religion, carries that generational trauma, simply because many of the dogma, by definition, it's a set of rules, breaking of which puts us in a disadvantageous. Oh my goodness, I can't even pronounce that word. Put us in the disadvantage. And there's a good reason why dogmas use those kind of methods. And they kind of worked to some extent in the past, when religion played also a very important political role and role to create the society. But these days, when we have different institutions to take care of the laws, we have police reinforcement, we are much more evolved people. We no longer need religious institutions to tell us what to do. And nevertheless, there's still that very strong trend, I find, in put through religious institutions to tell us what to do and tell us what are the consequences if you not do things the way that the rules clearly state. So thank you for that. So when it comes to guilt, and particularly when you explore guilt on your own, you should ask yourself a question whether you're responsible for the situation that you feel guilty about. Very often, there are situations in which we feel guilty even though we try to stick to the values that we believe in. So something didn't pan out the way we wanted because we stood our ground, and now we feel guilty about it. What about those situations where we have no say about what happened? Can you give me an example from your own life about the situations that you feel guilty about and you could do nothing about? Sharon says, I think it's important to examine conscience, which I believe confession should be. Conscience can have an important role as long as it's separated and not assumed as shame. It's a very good point, Sharon. Thank you. Yeah, indeed. There must be that separation and clear boundary between one and another. Sunni says misinterpretations of situation in the past by others. That is very true. we have certain opinions, certain beliefs, certain views, and certain perceptions, and it's very easy to say to other person and make that person feel guilty, even though that person did not have a chance or had nothing to do with the situation. So this is certainly a good example. By the way, thank you, Katie and Caroline, for your kind support and donations. I appreciate them very much. Katie says, guilt can come and go depending on how it is interpreted and intended, perhaps. Very much so. Thank you, Katie, for that comment. Guilt, as Dave actually pointed out, very often is a quality or something in our head that we explore. And guilt is not the same in our eyes and may look different very much in the eyes of an observer. It depends on a perspective. So this is a very important point. Charlotte says, being a parent will always involve feeling guilty for not doing your best at all times. But nobody can. Beautiful comment, Charlotte. Charlotte gives an example and kind of a solution in the same comment. I am not a parent myself, and I don't have a complete form of reference, but speaking to my parents, I can say how my mom always felt guilty for not doing enough. But the truth is, if I ask you, Charlotte, or any of you who is a parent, is it really possible? Is it possible for any parent to do absolutely everything and do absolutely right? Again, not speaking as a parent, I can say with quite certainty that it's impossible for anyone to do the right thing, because the learning process, being a parent or any kind of playing any role, involves making mistakes. And part of the role of the guilt is to point out towards the mistakes we do so we can amend them and learn from them in a way that is beneficial to us. So again, we're not crossing that line between guilt and shame. Shame being that very low frequency emotion which really drags us down, demotivates us. It's self-defeating. Thank you so much, Scott. Suni says, my son was only recently diagnosed with dyslexia. It should have been diagnosed earlier. The school let us down, but I still feel guilty. This is a great example. Thank you for bringing that up, Suni. This is certainly nothing you could do about your son's dyslexia. This is not something that you have influence on, but you still feel guilty. There is a feeling in you that, again, it is important to, and I want to point out towards that, the sentence I said before, ask yourself, are you responsible for what happened? Do you really have a good reason to feel guilty? Davi says, anything you couldn't fix from the past, example, a bad move in a situation with my partner, then even when you apologize, the dynamics change to a negative way, leading to separation. Thank you, Davi, for sharing that. I can speak for my own experience in this case for sure, that relationship, it's the ground where guilt play very often, always, in every relationship, plays a role. And again, making that amends, I think there is no other place, for me at least, where making amends and learning from your own mistakes and apologizing, it's so important. And I think a quality of a mature relationship is to recognize that we all do mistakes. And in a loving relationship, it is important to recognize that we can come back and apologize for them and admit that something went wrong. And as Sharon always pointed out to me, that, I create an environment in which we can explore that, a safe environment in which relationship can grow, rather to, as Davi pointed out, will be diminished. There are so many comments. There are so many comments, unbelievable. Thank you guys for coming and sending those comments. Absolutely incredible. So many of you. I'm almost can't read all of it. Caroline, wow, that's a topic. What a topic is this, Tomek? You have touched a nerve within so many of us. I imagine this will be a recurring topic of discussion for all time. I think it should be, because such a guilt. It's such a human emotion. And we encounter it so very often, but I believe is not enough discussed, particularly in the way that can be beneficial to us. And maybe to kind of give you tools or ways of applying and exploring guilt in a way that actually is beneficial, in the way that we can learn something from it. I prepared for you something that I found on a website called Healthline, and I found it very, very beneficial. I want to share with you. I really like it because it's almost like a scientific protocol of how to deal with the emotion of guilt. So it starts with naming your guilt. It's so simple. But many of us usually stick to thinking internally about guilt and ruminating about the past situation about which we feel guilty about. But from the psychological point of view, it is very therapeutic to actually name your guilt out loud. Give it a name. Name the situation about you feel guilty about. And that points out towards the second one when we exploring the guilt, and point out towards the source of it. Am I, again, coming back to that question, am I really responsible for the situation I feel guilty about? Perhaps, as in case of, I believe, Suni, there's nothing can be done about the dyslexia of her son. And yet we feel guilty about it. So it is important to name it. I feel guilty about it, but there's nothing I can do about it. And I never had a chance actually to do anything about it. But in the situation where we did something wrong and we feel guilty about it, this is our chance to shine, because we have ability to make ourselves vulnerable and apologize. Come forth, apologize, and try to make amends. This is perhaps one of the most important ways for us to grow and to learn. To apologize and to make amends. To do things better next time. It is okay to make mistakes. And it is also okay to come forth and to make amends. This is such a natural way of doing things, but I believe not so many of us choose to walk this path. And point 4 of the protocol, how to deal with the guilt, teaches us to learn from the past. Guilt, as I said, have very strong evolutionary roots. And it comes from the fact that in the past, if we did a mistake, there was this urge in us coming from our mind to tell us, what can I do better next time to avoid feeling the same way? It goes without saying that feeling guilty is not the best feeling in the world. I don't believe there's anyone who wants to feel guilty. So think about guilt as an evolutionary adjustment, or evolutionary stimulation, even better, for us to do better next time. Next one, very important one. When there are those situations like Suni mentioned, when we feel guilty in spite of the fact that there was nothing we could done better, it is important to practice gratitude I'm sorry, no. To practice self-compassion. I skipped the point. Gratitude is, again, important in cases where we learn something. You recognize that guilt appeared on the canvas of your emotions, and then you pointed you out to the mistake towards you made, and you can actually look at it with gratitude and say, now I know better. Maybe I'm not feeling great right now, but that helps me to make amends and to learn. So we can approach healing from guilt by using gratitude. And then in the point 6, that follows out of it is to replace that negative self-talk. I'm not good enough. I can't make it. Again, crossing that line between guilt and shame, when we feel ashamed, when we become self-destructive, demotivated, when we pointing things, moving the balance from the situation towards the self, asking those classic questions, what is wrong with me? So replace that negative self-talk with self-compassion. It is okay to make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. There is a room for improvement. I can apologize. I can make amends. And remember that, as I said already, that guilt can be a good motivation for so many of us to do better next time. It is a tool. Guilt evolved or appeared in our mind as a tool of improvement, after all. And last but not least, forgive yourself. This is something that is very close to my heart because it goes without saying that we are all the harshest critics of ourselves. And the self-critic I talk about so much during my meditation is very strong in me. And I found that the ability to forgive yourself for making mistakes is absolutely fundamental if you want to move forward. Otherwise, we are held down energetically, emotionally, and by debilitating emotion of shame and guilt that will not allow us to move forward. And ultimately, that's what we want to do when we grow. To put things in the past, to acknowledge them the way they are, not trying to pretend that nothing happened, but also acknowledge that we allowed to do those mistakes and we allowed to amend them and do things better next time. Katie said that I missed so many comments. I apologize for that. Dave said, it is also worth mentioning that we are all here. We are trying to become better people through the power of mindfulness. This is a great step. Exactly. Thank you, Dave, for sharing that. Absolutely. We are always on the path of growth. And growth means that improvement happens. Change is the only constant in the universe. One of my favorite sayings. We change all the time. Things that we done in the past, from perspective of an adult person, do not seem so bad. When I think about all those little things I did as a little boy, and I felt ashamed, certainly guilty, maybe even ashamed of, now they don't seem so bad because I grew around my experience and my knowledge, grew around those things. And looking back, exploring guilt in those situations we feel guilty about, it is important because they bring important information that we can learn from. Okay, we are approaching 35th minute of our Conscious Living Collective. And I want to turn now to the meditation part, unless you have still more questions. Always remember that if I don't answer all the questions here, you are very welcome to come to our circle called Tomek Circle and ask those questions there. That's where we have more time to explore those things. So Tomek Circle, almost 600 of us there. You're always welcome to join and ask your questions there. Yeah, thank you so much for your support, guys, and for your kind donations. It's such a small thing, but makes me feel that my time with you it's worthwhile. Not because you're donating; your presence is the most important thing, but it makes me feel appreciated. Thank you so much. Okay, so without further ado, perhaps we should jump into meditation and see how thoughts, mind wandering, and all those aspects, common aspects of meditation, guide us through the experience. And if guilt in any form or shape shows up at any given point, I hope now you have at least a better understanding of it to deal with it in a more constructive way rather than detrimental way. Again, never crossing the line between guilt and shame. Exploring guilt in positive, empowering way. Thank you so much, V. Thank you so much, Jane. I appreciate it very much. Okay, so here we are. Thank you so much for your presence, guys. I really appreciate it. Thank you for taking your time to spend it here. I'm always happy to see all my regulars with which I'll be meeting actually on Thursday during my Patron session via Zoom. And also all those of you who are here for the first time. Thank you for joining me and for trusting that the content I'm sharing with you has a value and is beneficial to your personal growth and impacts you in a positive way. All right. So let's begin. Begin by acknowledging that you are a part of a larger community. By being here, you became ultimately a part of a conscious living, of the conscious living collective. And now we are going to meditate together and connect on a deeper level and integrate all that knowledge, that all the lessons that we learn here, and see how they work in the space of meditation. Okay. So as always, begin by making yourself at ease and shifting your body into a position that embody your intention behind this meditation. I usually sit with my back straight so I can work with my breath. Breath is always a good tool to work with. It's always I call it my friend, to which I can always return. It's always there, always with me. So sitting upright with my feet on the floor, feeling grounded and supported with my hands in my lap, helps me to stay alert and attentive. And begin by acknowledging all the bodily sensations that you are connected with. Acknowledge all the sensations that come to you through your physical senses. Acknowledge that it is okay to be you, with no guilt, no shame, and no regret. You sit with yourself, being fully yourself, acknowledging everything that comes to you, all the thoughts, all the emotions. And now, being ready to connect with the present moment. Drop down into your breath. And for this practice, I invite you to focus your attention on the area of your abdomen and see how your belly moves, expands and contracts as you breathe in and breathe out. And for this practice, make that simple expansion and contraction of your belly as you breathe in and breathe out your anchor, a place of safe return every time you feel distracted, every time you feel that your mind wanders. And right here at the start, I want to say there's no right or wrong way of doing it. It's only your personal way of doing it. And the question may arise in your head, am I doing it right? Oh, I can't do it. It's not working for me. In this very moment, you can come back to yourself, say, this is an exploration. It is okay to wander. It is okay for your mind to wander. There's no right or wrong way of breathing. It is only your unique way of taking and approaching this practice. And recognize that each and every person here will take something different from this practice. Although you hear the same guidance, every and each of you, your experience, how you receive it is different. And this is absolutely okay. This is the nature of this practice. That it is personal, it is unique. And at the same time, taps into the collective consciousness of this group. You feel worthy. You feel loved. You feel enough. And as always, I'm here by your side to give you the support, to offer my guidance, to say that you are not alone, whatever you experience right now. And if any regrets, any situations that feel guilty about come to your mind at any stage, you may say, I am work in progress. I am here to learn. I am constantly changing. And remember that you can always come back to your breath. expansion and contraction of your belly that is always there. For you to anchor yourself with or in. So just a couple of more breaths, feeling grounded, still, worthy, loved enough. And to conclude, shift the awareness towards the space around you. Recognize the room that you are sitting in. And when you're ready, open your eyes. And welcome back. Okay, there we are. Back from the meditation. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for meditating with me. Thank you so much for holding space for me. Thank you so much for sharing your comments and contributing to the life of this Conscious Living Collective. We will return next week for the US session, as I call it. It'll be 12 p.m. here in Sydney, which is around evening in the US, and I think it's middle of the night in Europe. But if you, by any chance, if you are here and you're still awake, you're always very welcome to join. So once again, thank you so much for your kind support, for being here. Feel free to check my YouTube channel if you wish to revisit some past sessions. I always try to publish the audio version of our Conscious Living Collective sessions here on Insight Timer, but usually it takes time before they being approved. So it is always the best to come here and to spend some time live. And for those of you who perhaps are struggling or feeling challenged by the feelings of self-worth and want to explore them a bit deeper, I offer mentoring sessions here on Insight Timer. So feel free to go to my profile and check if this is something you'd like to do and work with me one-on-one. Otherwise, there are always plenty of resources on my profile. I think almost 100 guided meditations that you always are always free to use, and you're welcome to practice those meditations. So with that in mind, I want to once again thank you for your presence, for being here. And I look forward to catching up with you and with our wonderful Conscious Living Collective next time. So please do sign up for the notifications. And I'm sorry, I apologize. And you will receive